Shalom. Shalom, can you hear me? Shalom, can you hear me? Shalom, can you hear me now? Shalom, can you hear me again? Shalom, can you hear me? Shalom, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Shalom, can you hear me now? Shalom, can you hear me now? Shalom, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? You can hear me now, ladies? Okay, thank you. Can you hear Sister Malka's music now? Okay, thank you, sisters. So we're going to wait just 2 more minutes, and then we will get started with the course. So everyone can hear me without the speakers, right? Shalom, Sister Mikael. Shalom, Sister Ace, TD Eve, Monica, Mother Malaka, Abru, Rich Tonya, Kelly from Restoring the Branches, a really good ministry to check out. Marriage Moments with Mystiqua. And Andre, we know is not in the class, but a great marriage ministry to check out. Shalom, I hope you all connect with the sisters here that have different ministries. Sister Mikael is doing a challenge now. Hope you all connect with everyone and with each other. Shalom, everyone. Shalom, Sister Monica, Sister Yiska. We are praying with you, sis. So we're going to listen to one more minute of music by our sister Malka Norwood, a song for the Daughters of Yah, available on iTunes and Spotify. and then we'll get started.
Of the way that He made you, 'cause He made you fearfully and wonderfully. Every part of you is His image.
Thank you for everyone who's here early and on time.
Look down on you for what you are or what you make. Stand tall and walk in what you know, in what you know.
Mother Malaka, I'm calling you to open us up with prayer in a minute.
He's creating in you the desire to do what pleases Him. You gotta want it more than anyone wants it for yourself. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Shalom, everyone. Can you see the PowerPoint slide? Shalom, everyone. Welcome. Can you see the PowerPoint slide? With everyone. Okay, thank you. So now I want to welcome you to the Mourning Women of Zion, the Wailing Women of Zion, the Mourning Women of Africa, and the Call of Jeremiah 9 class. We are going to get started with opening prayer by Mother Malaka, who many of you know of the Women of the Whirlwind Prayer Ministry, and then we're going to dive right into the scriptures and the course. So give me a moment to call our sister, and if we can prepare our hearts and minds for prayer, that would be great. Let's prepare to enter the throne of grace. Shalom. You're on speakerphone, sis, so I'm handing it over to you to open us up in prayer. Can everyone hear?
Hallelujah. 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 We praise you, Abba. Hallelujah. We lift you up, Abba. We adore you, Father. We thank you, Father, for your mercy towards us. We thank you, Father, for your graciousness.
Yes,
we thank you, Father, that we woke up this morning and, Father, that we had a day filled with whatever responsibilities you've given us. We thank you for, Father, because some is with us today.
Yes,
we don't take it for granted, Father.
Yes,
we thank you. We praise you, Father. We look to you, Father, because it's in you, Father, that we live and we move and we exist. And so we look to you, Father, the words that come from you. Father, you said that if any lacks instruction, lacks wisdom, that we should seek it from you.
Yes,
and so, Father, as we gather together in this time of learning, we ask, Father, that you would teach us from your very mouth. Father, that you would speak through your servant, Sister Only Love. Father, that you would reveal,
more.
Father, that you would transform us through the washing of the water of the word. That, Father, as we hear your word, we would be inspired, motivated, that we would be enlightened. Father, that we would be strengthened. Father, I pray that this would increase our resolve to prayer.
Yes,
This would motivate us, Father, to come into those times of crying out. Abba, I pray that you would give us clarity regarding the necessity for prayer in our community. Father, I pray that you would give us wisdom concerning our role and our part that we play in crying out to you on behalf of people. Father, I pray for Sister Only Love that you would speak through her. Father, I pray that you bless her as she blesses your daughters. I pray, Father, for each one under the sound of my voice or who will hear this later, that you would open our hearts, open our minds, speak to us those things which we need from you today, Father.
Have your way.
This lesson, Father.
Let your
anointing fall. Strengthen and feel and fuel, Father, with purpose. Have your way. We welcome your Ruach.
We welcome you, y'all.
We welcome you. We ask you to have your way. Be esteemed amongst your daughters.
Yes, y'all.
In Yeshua's name we pray.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Mother Malaka. And we will hear from Mother Malaka later when we talk about how Wailing Women looks in the practical and share some testimonies. Thank you so much, Mother Malaka. So hallelujah with that powerful prayer. We just really appreciate it and appreciate having prayer for this ministry. So before we delve into the course, the Wailing Women of Zion, the Mourning Women of Africa, and the call of Jeremiah 9, I want to read to you what I call the Wailing Women scripture from Jeremiah 9, verses 17 to 26. And you can follow along in the word if you have your word with you. Thus says Yah of hosts, consider and call for the wailing women, that they may come, and send for the wise wailing women, that they may come. Let them make haste and take up a wailing for us, that our eyes may run with tears, and our eyelids gush with water. For a voice of wailing is heard from Zion. How we are plundered! We are greatly ashamed, because we have forsaken the land, because we have been cast out of our dwellings. Yet hear the word of Yah, O women, and let your ear receive the word of his mouth. Teach your daughters wailing, and everyone her neighbor a lamentation. For death has come through our windows, has entered our palaces or our homes, to kill off the children, no longer to be outside, and the young men no longer to be on the streets. Speak, thus says Yah. Even the carcasses of men shall fall as dung on the open road, like cuttings after the harvester, and no one shall gather them. Thus says Yah, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches, but let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Yah, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these I delight, says Yah. Behold, the days are coming, says Yah, that I will punish all who are circumcised with the uncircumcised. Egypt, Yehuda, Edom, the people of Ammon, Moab, and all who are in the furthest corners, who dwell in the wilderness. For all these nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel are uncircumcised in heart. May Yah add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of his word. Hallelujah. So, sisters, again, I want to welcome you to this course. It is a series of courses that started with ancient Hebraic womanhood and moved on to ancient Hebraic marriage. And now, again, we're going to look at a role that women in Israel played before the full exile and scattering of our people. We're going to see how this wailing women role was brought into Africa and preserved in Africa. And then we're going to look at how we can employ this special call in our everyday lives on behalf of our nation at this crucial time of Bible prophecy. My name is Only Love Chica Alston, and I'm the founder of Prophetic Whirlwind, Uncovering the Black Biblical Destiny, which is a teaching ministry dedicated to uncovering and teaching about and connecting with Hebrews in Africa, uncovering what I call Hebraic womanhood based on the scriptures and our culture before exile, and also calling our people to do justice in our communities for the orphan, the widow, those in prisons, the homeless, and Prophetic Whirlwind was founded in 2014 when two church mothers, Roz Hall and Roberta Todd, invited me to do a series of workshops at the oldest church in New York City on the Black roots of the Bible. As we know, the people of the book are Hebrews, but I do use terms like Black, African, African American, so that all of our people can understand. I was trained in theology and social work, and I have traveled to Africa, Ghana, 3 times Nigeria, twice Togo, Morocco. But before all of that, I was a foster child and someone who experienced homelessness, who at 10 years old was called to prayer and reading the word by Yah. And at 14, I say that I was redeemed by Yahshua, reconnected to him, reconnected to the branch. And in 2012, I learned of my Hebrew roots. And so I always say that my accolades don't mean anything, that I was just a girl who Yah plucked out, a lost sheep that he took care of, an orphan that he literally rescued from the hell that I was facing here, not only the hell of the afterlife. And so I always like to share my testimony because I think before anyone teaches you anything, you should know a little bit about who they are. I love to see our Hebraic culture preserved in Africa, though even though there, because of our exile, some things have been corrupted. And I also love to see how Yah is on the side of the suffering in scripture and Yah's call to justice. The picture you see is from this June when I visited the Sefwi Hebrews of Ghana, and in their town, they have streets called Zion Lane, Psalm, such and such lane, and I thought that that was pretty cool. So some of what I was studying in books and online, I was able to see face to face in the Hebrew family in Africa, whether messianic or so-called Torah only, believe in prayer, all night prayer, worshiping with your whole heart, ecstatic prayer. It's not only about identity and what you know in your brain among the Hebrews in Africa, but prayer and worship is at the forefront of everything they do, regardless of what they believe. And so I want to communicate that and just welcome everyone who is here. Thank you for being with us again. I want to just go do an overview of what we're going to examine tonight. We're going to examine wailing women in scripture and this tradition of mourning or wailing women in ancient Israel and also the ancient Near East. Wailing women or mourning women are also found in the so-called Middle East and Asia. And even in America, we'll see that some of our people brought that over here. We'll examine the mourning woman tradition in Africa. We will also examine the call of Jeremiah 9 and how to answer this call for our people today, right now, in real time. Each session will include a lecture, and then we'll have questions and answers from all of you as participants. And then I always like to leave us with next steps for action because we don't want to be ever learning but never coming into the knowledge of the truth. So I'd like to lay down some ground rules because we have many different types of women who registered for this class, and I want to make sure that this is a comfortable and enjoyable environment for everyone, even in the chat. So just remember that participants in this course may come from different backgrounds, different faith traditions, and different levels of knowledge. In light of this, we must be respectful in the comment section and during the question and answer. Please be sure to abide by these community ground rules so that we all have a positive experience. No name calling or berating someone's opinion, faith, or beliefs. If you want to share information that can help a sister grow in truth, leave resources in the comments section, share resources during the Q&A time, or email me resources to share in the post-session emails. But please do not share resources or information in a way that makes someone feel like they're dumb or less than. We're all learning, we're all returning, and so let's be humble. Please make sure that all questions, answers, and comments relate to this series topic. If you have other questions that you would like to share with me, just feel free to email me at info@propheticworldwind.com, and my information will be shared at the end. But let's stay focused because I like to respect everyone's time. And then I want to thank Mother Malaka, Dawn, Monica, Tanya, and Sister Yiska, who are a part of the prayer team, for moderating the comment section or for just praying in the background. The prayer is truly appreciated and the service is truly appreciated. Also, please don't share this course link publicly. About 380 women have received this course link because they registered for this course or past courses. but I'm asking you not to share this publicly. Tomorrow you will get information about how those who couldn't register for this course can receive the course. But you can share what you learned on social media with the hashtag Wailing Women, Prophetic Whirlwind, or Well for Black Sisters. And I'll tell you where that last hashtag came from when we talk about wailing women in our everyday life. Also, please respect all ladies, even if you disagree. And just be mindful that I may not be able to address the comment section while presenting because it's a lot, but we do have multiple moderators that can make sure that your questions and your comments get to me. And then at the end of the lecture, I'll be able to address the comment section. Again, keep Yah first and come in a spirit of prayer. At the heart of this session is going to be the very important, unique role that the Daughters of Zion have around prayer in this hour. Also notice that some of the books, video, and audio that we're using for pre-work, post-work, and even some of my sources in this lesson may use different words for Yah or Yahshua, or maybe by people of different backgrounds and faith traditions. But don't allow this to turn you off from valuable information. There is wisdom that can be found everywhere. Take what resonates with you, chew the meat, and spit out the bones. And also pray about and study further anything I present. Don't just take my word for it. Make sure whatever I present lines up with Yah's call and will for your life at this time. So, when we look at the Wailing Women tradition, it was not only done in ancient Israel, but it was done in the ancient Near East. So that could be Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Yemen, many places. And I want to just talk about this piece of artwork from the Brooklyn Museum. I am born and raised in Brooklyn. I live in Harlem now, but I love the Brooklyn Museum, anything with Brooklyn. But this is actually a relief of mourning women from 1319 to 1204 BC, made in Egypt. So when we look at Egypt, New Kingdom funerals often featured female mourners wailing and gesturing dramatically. Although sometimes called professional mourners, more likely these local women joined the funeral procession to express solidarity and sorrow, and also to participate in a public event. This sloppy carving and the indistinct lines show that the sculptor of this tomb relief was relatively unskilled, but he did successfully convey how ancient women demonstrated grief by throwing dust on their heads and even falling to the ground. The different shapes of the figures indicate different ages. Now, even though Abraham and Sarah were Hebrews and Isaac and the 12 tribes, Israel really became a nation during their bondage in Egypt and the Exodus out. So even though we have a lot of beefs with Egypt, Egypt and Israel share a lot of things in common as both so-called people of color or black people. There's even a time later in history when Israel is about to be attacked by Assyrians, and guess who comes to their rescue? Egyptian brothers. So that we have a very intertwined history, especially Ham and Shem. And so even though we have our differences, it's important not to have hate, because we do have a lot of cultural traditions that are the same. When in Hebrew culture, people would cover themselves with ashes and sackcloth when they were mourning. And you know, many of us who have been to so-called African American funerals or even African funerals, have seen people fall to the ground, even try to jump in the caskets when they pass away. I always make a joke, if no one tries to jump in my casket at my funeral, I wasn't really loved. So we know that our people, we mourn with all that we have. We're a passionate people. And I think that that is something good for us, because y'all really want sincerity when we talk about being wailing women. And I want to say hi to Minister Siobhan McKay, who actually helped found the Wailing Women Prayer. I want to say hi to my sister, very anointed woman of Yah, joining us. So when we look at the Wailing Women tradition in ancient Israel, the first biblical account of mourning was after Sarah's death. We read in Genesis 23:2, the first we read in Genesis 23:2, and Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. So actually, in the scripture, the first recording of someone being mourned for was Sarah, our matriarch, a woman. This is a picture of Sarah's supposed tomb in Hebron, Israel. We're going to talk about why her tomb is in a certain place later, but many people, go and visit it. I'm not sure if this is actually her literal tomb, but I thought it was something cool to share. And to see Abraham as a man and a patriarch bewail for Sarah actually shows how much love he had for her in a culture where men did not usually show sorrow. So the practice of having paid mourners is believed to have begun in the East, meaning the so-called Middle East or Northeast Africa, Asia, but it was also found in ancient Egypt and Rome. In Egypt, there was always two professional women mourners present at a burial who were representatives of Egyptian goddesses, showing a connection between mourning women and the divine. What we need to know is that certain principles are from Yah. Certain principles were given to all humanity, kind of like what they call Edenic, like from Eden. But many nations, because they did not follow Yah, corrupted some of our traditions. So even though some may use the wailing women or mourning woman tradition in consort with different deities that are not Yah, it doesn't mean that being a wailing or a mourning woman is wrong. It's just that each nation's mourning women mourned in conjunction with the deity they serve. So that is very important to remember because the mourning women of Israel are to mourn in conjunction with Yah. To be a mourner in Egypt, a woman could not have borne children. Their body hair was shaved and the names of Egyptian goddesses were inscribed on their shoulders. Professional mourners, also called moralologists, are compensated to lament or deliver a eulogy and help comfort and entertain the grieving family. Remember, the wailing women or mourning women of the ancient Near East and even today in Asia and Africa were in our official positions. So this is not just something nice to do, but this was seen as a community position. And even today, we have therapists and counselors who are professionals who help people get through mourning and sadness and depression in their life. So throughout their time, professional mourners have been women because they could more easily express emotions. It was also socially undesirable for a man to weep in public. So when we read that one sentence that Abraham bewailed Sarah, that shows how critical and crucial Sarah was. And those of you who took ancient Hebraic womanhood, we did a whole session about Sarah, who was a queen, a princess. Some of the Hebrew sages say that Abraham preached to the men about there being one deity, one God, and that Sarah preached to the women the oneness of Yah, that she was very important. Even in China, mourners have been used for over 2,000 years. Recently, there is a well-known mourner named Hugh Zixline, and I am so sorry for butchering her name, but she and her brother work together by dancing and singing. She will begin to cry and wail. She will also crawl toward the coffin to beg the deceased to come back home. Her mourning is more like a theatrical production, and it is said she is well sought after and is paid well and is even featured on TV. But when the women of Israel mourn and answer the call for wailing women, sincerity, not theatrics, is going to be very key. In many of our houses of worship, we have a lot of theatrics with the sisters, but are their hearts truly broken towards Yah? Margaret Atsu's landmark study, The Ritual Lament in Greek Tradition, calls attention to the gender characteristics of mourning practices and language. Throughout antiquity in both Greek and Middle Eastern cultures, the lament, a standard feature of ritual life, belonged largely to women who gathered to lead the community in the rites of grief in the Bible. Just as in the classical tradition, the lament was associated with the feminine. So again, many cultures that Israel interacted with, later in Yeshua's time, Greek and Rome, we interacted with them a lot. They also have these wailing women. So again, the wailing women tradition in ancient Israel. The Hebrews, at the death of their friends, relations, made striking demonstrations of grief and mourning. That's how you know we're the Hebrew people, because if you ever been to a so-called black funeral, you know how we turn up for those who have passed. They would weep, tear their clothes, smote their breasts, threw dust upon their heads. We see this in Joshua 7:6. They would lay on the ground. They would go barefoot. They would pull their hair in braids or cut them. And we see this in Ezra 9:3 and Isaiah 15:2. They would make incisions on their breasts or would tore them with their nails. We see this in Leviticus 19:28 and 21:5. I'm sorry, not Leviticus, Lamentations, which is a very key book for our discussion tonight. In Jeremiah 16:6 and 48:37, we see this. This time of mourning was commonly 7 days. We see this in 1 Samuel 31:11 to 13, but it could be lengthened or shortened according to circumstances. For Moses and Aaron, they mourned for 30 days because they were great men in Israel. Jacob, they mourned for 70 days because of his greatness. They would also go up to the roof or upon a platform of their houses to bewail their misfortune. They would gird themselves with sackcloth on the tops of their houses and in their streets. Everyone shall howl, weeping abundantly. We see this in Isaiah 15:3. And when I was in theology school, my advisor was Puerto Rican. And she told me that in Puerto Rico, especially among the older people, when someone would die, you would go out to like an isolated place or a mountain and you would just scream to the tip of your lungs. Like this was, when I read this, I was thinking about the mourning tradition in Puerto Rico, where many of our people were taken into captivity. They would hire women to weep and wail, and also persons to play on instruments at the funerals of the rich and distinguished. We see this in Jeremiah 9:17. And Matthew 9:23, we observe a company of minstrels or players on the flute at the funeral of a girl who was about 12 years old. So Israel definitely had wailing or mourning women. That tradition was very much a part of our culture. According to biblical analysts, this verse is implying that Lamentations is like an art. People who were deemed good at wailing and moaning were then able to take part in more and more funerals and were expected to make these moaning sounds. Women played an integral part when it came to mourning. Wailing women are called to lead the people in expressions of grief in response to the national tragedy that saw the destruction of Zion. These women were called to raise a dirge, or basically a sad song over us. And they're literally called wise women. This can also be translated as skillful women in Jeremiah 9:17, suggesting that the art of mourning is a skill that has to be learned. The role of the wailing woman constituted a professional trade that required training. This debunks the whole women be silent, women did nothing in Israel, women could not work. Many people spread false, theories about what the women of Zion can and cannot do or did do. But when you look in our ancient culture before exile and even at the beginning of our first exiles, you see that the women actually had key roles. On the appropriate occasion, a funeral or a national tragedy, like described in Jeremiah 9, wailing women not only had to be able to draw on the reservoir of lament handed down through the generations, but they also had to adapt these lamentations to suit the particular need of the current situation. Their laments represent the community's response in face of extreme trauma. So we talk about the older women teaching the younger women to wail. Did you know that studies are coming out showing if your grandmother was traumatized, you as a woman carry her trauma in your genes? So even though you may have not had an older woman to teach you to lament the state of our people, the sadness and the grief over the state of our people is literally, as a woman, in your genes going all the way back to your grandmother. Now, for many of us, think about the conditions our grandmothers lived in and had to see with our people, with segregation, cotton picking, and all of those things. Without them even knowing, they were teaching us to lament. And that's why it's important for us to get healing, because we're going to pass on to our granddaughters the trauma that is in us now if it is not resolved. The custom of hiring women to weep and wail has even come down to modern times. The following account of such a scene at Nablus, the ancient Shechem, which is an Israelite city of Manasseh, is from Dr. Joawit. Listen to this account. The governor of the city had died the very morning of Dr. Joawit's arrival. On coming within sight of the gate, we perceived a numerous company of females who were singing in a kind of recitative, far from melancholy, and beating time with their hands. If this be mourning, I thought, it is kind of strange. It had indeed sometimes more of an air of angry defiance. But on our reaching the gate, it was suddenly exchanged for the most hideous plants and streaks, which, with the feeling that we were entering a city at no time celebrated for its hospitality, struck a very dismal impression upon my mind. They accompanied us a few paces, but it soon appeared that the gate was their station, to which, having received nothing from us, they returned. We learned in the course of the evening that these were only a small detachment of a various numerous body of cunning women, or wise women, with the design, as of old, to make the eyes of all the inhabitants run down with tears, and their eyelids gush out with water, as in Jeremiah 9, verses 17 to 18. For this good service they would the next morning wait upon the government and principal persons to receive some trifling fee. So again, this is an example of a city of Manasseh of wailing women. And what we need to understand about being wailing women, it's not just a cute title, even though it was an official position in ancient Israel and the ancient Near East. But you have to sometimes let your dignity and your pride down in order to be able to mourn and wail. If you are concerned about looking cute, if you are concerned about looking smart, if you are concerned about looking pristine and just looking like an intellectual Hebrew, you will never be able to answer the call of the wailing woman. Now, Yah does things in decency and in order, so we can get into some of the chaotic manifestations of the spirit that we see in many churches, but there is a time for a broken and contrite heart. And when you look at our people, that time is now. So let's look at wailing women in the scriptures. 2 Samuel 14:2 says, So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, Pretend you are in mourning, dress in mourning clothes and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. 2 Chronicles 35:25. And Jeremiah lamented for Josiah, and all the singing men and the singing women spoke of Josiah and their lamentations to this day, and made them an ordinance in Israel, and behold, they were written in the Lamentations. So the first scripture shows we can't have any vanity in being a wailing woman. The second scripture shows that it should not be individual mourning for our people, but we need to even rouse our whole nation of Israel to mourn for the state of our people. Ecclesiastes 12:5. Also, when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because man goes to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. You hear a lot about mourners or wailing women. You don't really hear about the wailing woman or the mourner, because really, though when we look at Rachel, we'll see a woman wailing and weeping by herself. This is really a collective call. You got to have some sisters to wail with. Amos 5:16 says, Therefore thus says the Yah El of hosts, the king, there is wailing in all the plazas and in all the streets. They say, Alas, alas. They also call the farmer to mourning and professional mourners to lamentation. And that just shows again that this was an official position in our communities. So now we're going to translate to Africa. Many of us know that during the various exiles Israel went through, that the Hebrews, many of them migrated into Africa. And so many of the traditions of Hebrew culture went right into Africa with us. But we also know that Egypt had mourning women. So of course, because many native Egyptians were pushed down to places like Sudan, most of the Sudanese are the actual real Egyptians, though there are some Sudanese Hebrews. So we know that if wailing women and mourning women existed in ancient Israel and ancient Egypt, that went into Africa with the people from those lands that were pushed to Central, West, South, North Africa. So in Ezekiel, we actually see some Ham sisters being called to wail. The prophet will call the women of the ancient African nation of Nubia, which is today Sudan, to join in the lament and to weep for all of their people. This is a wailing, and it shall be wailed. The women of the world shall wail it. Over Nubia, Sudan, and all its nations they shall wail it, says the sovereign El. Ezekiel 32:16. We should not be getting into this dirty Hamite talk that I see online many times. Ham and Shem mixed together. And this is a Hebrew prophet calling women of Ham and Nubia to wail. So that should show us the connection we have. Anyone, even if they're not a Hebrew, can graft on to the nation of Israel through Yeshua. So there's no room for hate. Throughout Africa, professional mourning women or wailing women are employed to publicly weep, wail, and lament for the deceased, continuing this long tradition. And many Hebraic tribes in Africa participate in utilizing mourning women, and widows from these tribes have to undergo elaborate mourning processes. So this photo is from mourning women in South Africa, where we know there are a lot of Hebrews. The women of Sudan, especially South Sudan, go through a lot of oppression and slavery by the Arabs. And so I want to just invite us to lift the people of Sudan, biblically known as Nubia, up in our prayers and to wail for them, because even to this day, some of them are slaves. And yes, someone said, what a picture, what emotion. Yes, these sisters are not thinking about how they look, about being dignified. They're putting their all into this. And when we come to Yah in prayer, and when we see what prayer means in the Hebrew, we have to put our all into calling out to Yah. So in many African, so-called Middle Eastern, and I say so-called Middle Eastern because Israel was physically connected to Egypt, which is in Africa, until the Suez Canal was built in 1869. The term Middle East is something that was made up to really, I think, throw our people off from Israel's connection to Africa. And also we have Asian countries that have professional mourners. And again, even in ancient Israel, these wailing or mourning women were professionally trained most of the time. Now, this is kind of funny, but today in Africa and in Asia and the Middle East, this is like an official job. And because we have social media, our family in South Africa is looking for mourning women on social media. So even though this is a heavy topic, I wanted to share this ad with you. In South Africa, we're told by Mupaki MKP Molabatsi under the hashtag mourning is our passion, that death is business. If you want to, quote unquote, boost your funeral, professional mourners are hired out to come and cry. The charges are as follows: normal crying, 200 Rand per mourner, crying and rolling on the ground, 300 Rand per mourner, crying and insulting a bit, 400 Rand per mourner, crying and threatening to jump into the grave. Remember what I said? A lot of African Americans always try to jump in the grave. People say your funeral ain't really nothing if somebody don't try to jump in that grave. Well, in South Africa, you can get that 500 Rand per mourner. So the insulting a bit, I guess, is maybe insulting people who may have caused the death, or even insulting the deceased, kind of like in a roast. I'm not sure what that means. But the bigger the deceased in terms of wealth, the deceased commanded, the more numerous the professional mourners on site will be to grace the occasion and to provide tumultuous mourning. So I know this may be hard to hear, but this is not isolated to South Africa, but occurs across the continent in Africa and even among our African American family. I'm going to share something with y'all soon, and you're going to see how connected we are to our Hebrew family in Africa, and we don't even know it. So when we look at the Ewe people, also known as Ewe or Ewe people, which is really the original way to say Hebrew, but the Ewe are a tribe in Ghana and Togo, and there are many Ewe tribes, you know, especially in Ewe land in West Africa. But I want to talk about the people who are called the Ewe. They're wrongly called the Ewe because of German colonialists, but that's the name many people know them as. They live in Ghana and Togo, and among them, the funerals are extremely important. Funerals are the single most important event in a person's history, more lavish and expensive than any other celebration or feast. Groups of drummers are hired, and mourners may dance throughout the night for several nights in succession. So the mourners here don't only cry, they dance. Attending funerals and contributing to them financially and with food and drink are among the most binding obligations for lineage members, neighbors, friends, chiefs, and voodoo worshippers, above all for those who belong to the same order as the deceased. Among the Ewe, again, mourning women dance as well. This is a bona fide Hebrew tribe. They have a great deal of history and books that prove they came from Israel, and funerals are very critical. This is a picture from a funeral, and the mourning women not only mourn and well, but they dance as well. And you know, dance is very important to us. I would advise everyone to look into this tribe. So the Wailing women tradition among the Ga Adami people. The Ga Adami people are definitely an Ewe people. They're related to the Ewe. They are mostly in the Accra region of Ghana. They are related closely to the Yoruba, but they're made up of the tribes of Gad and Dan and Israel, hence their name. The reasons why people go through the widowhood rites and the Ga are varied, just as a set of practices are. Some go through these widowhood rites for love, farewell, blessings, proof of innocence, with respect to causing the spouse's death, and obedience to tradition are some of the reasons they go through these widowhood rites. Some of these rites include the wife sleeping in the room with her dead husband, and she has to stay confined 7 days. Remember, in Hebrew culture, if you're near a dead body, you're unclean for 7 days. Sometimes, because of modern culture, this can be 3 days to a month, after which she was taken to wash at the seaside. So if you are a Hebrew near a dead body back in Israel, you got to be clean for 7 days. Then on the 7th day, you go and do a mikvah in live water. We can see the Hebrewism in this tradition among the Goths. In ancient Israel, if you are around a dead body, you are unclean for 7 days and have to do a mikvah after. Ace, I don't know why they want insulting, but we don't know what that means culturally. So I wouldn't jump to too many judgments about it. But there are several other practices which are commonly carried out as a part of the widowhood rites. These include crying loudly most of the time, drinking the water that is used in bathing the corpse, and the widow sleeping with the corpse overnight, and heckling of the widow at funeral rites. So there's a lot women among these tribes have to do to prove that they didn't cause the death. Now, you have to understand, among Ga people, some are more tied to their traditional culture, some are more modernized or westernized. So not every Ga woman has to go through this or does. This is from an article about the women going through the traditional widow rites. Crying loudly is usually normal in Ghana, and Ghana has many, many Hebrews. When people lose a relative or friends, in view of this, widows are expected to cry loudly most of the time, at least until the final funeral rites have been performed when the man is laid to rest. Therefore, any widow who does not cry most of the time is induced or forced by the family to cry for everyone to know that it is her husband who has died. Among the Ga, as many Ghana funerals go, mourning women can be employed to also add to the wailing and the crying. So again, we see this. They want the widow to prove her sincerity by her crying. And if we want to be wailing women before Yah, we have to really prove to him that we have that broken and contrite heart, and we're not just saying words of prayer. Some of this, may seem hard on the sisters and may be hard, but that's why, with modern culture, some things are changing, but I think some things do need to remain the same. Now, you see a picture of this man, and this is actually a lion casket. Because among the Ga, they believe in very elaborate caskets that represent what you did or who you are in your life. So some caskets are actually cars, some were boats. And if you notice, certain segments of African Americans and Puerto Ricans have these funeral caskets that are like Ferraris and cars. I've seen pictures online, like on different websites that make fun of ghetto people, but then it's like, you know, we are still carrying some of these Hebrew cultural practices from Africa and we don't even know. So I thought that this was a funny picture, a Lion of Judah casket. You know, our people, y'all made us so creative. We are just too much. So when we go over to the Igbo of Nigeria, who's also a Hebrew tribe, the widow's mourning of the dead husband is viewed as a very important tradition, which the living spouse must observe in the honor of the dead. When the husband of the woman dies, the mourning begins at that moment of his final breath. The bereaved wife runs about wailing at the top of her voice. A prominent feature is the intensity of wailing and weeping and hysteria, which death generates or is expected to generate. The children would join in the wailing together with other friends and relatives of the family. In their wailing, they would regret a big loss as they recount the deceased life's achievements, his love and faithfulness as a good, honest, reliable brother, husband, father, or uncle. After this stage, the wife becomes the main focus in terms of mourning the departed husband. And this is a picture of an Igbo sister mourning. And again, if we saw our nation's true state as Yah sees it, as exiled, as dead bones, will we be just lackadaisical with our prayers? Or will we really truly cry out to Yah? In Igbo culture, if someone is dead, it's expected that you would be very passionate in your mourning. So, with the article that I asked you to read for this course, African Widowhood Practices, the Igbo Mourning Experience, I wanted you to have an overview of how the women of this Hebrew tribe mourned and wailed in exile, but I don't totally agree with some of the Christian theology in the article. So I wanted to make that clear. I do believe some things go too far in these practices, but I also did not like how he bashed the traditional Igbo culture, which is called Omina, and is very close to Torah. So we have to do a balance because as we went into Africa, we did corrupt some Torah practices, but then also we did preserve some things. So just to be mindful of that. But I give you articles not because I totally agree with them, but because I want you to get some of the information and things. So when we look at one of these practices, we see that this may have been a corruption of the separated period all Hebrews had to undergo after touching a dead person. In Numbers 19:11, it's only 7 days. But here, among the Igbo, after a husband dies, there's a seclusion period, Aino Nan Naso, that is a period of deep mourning that lasts for 7 native weeks. Because remember, they don't use the typical Gregorian calendar. They use a calendar more closely to the Hebrew calendar. But we notice sometimes when we are not fully in step with Yah, instead of doing just what he asks, we go over and above. And that is a state of, our exile. This totals 28 days. During this period, the widow never eats with nor talks to anybody except her fellow widows. She never greets nor responds to any greeting, but if she does, she is believed to have passed ill luck to the greeter or responder. She only wears rags and sits on a piece of wood and sleeps on a mat or banana leaves. From that moment the husband dies, the widow is believed to be unclean. That's similar as Torah because if a man died, usually the wife would have been right near him. And they see her as likely to contaminate herself and others. Therefore, no one touches her except the fellow widows who are equally believed to be defiled. But in Torah, anyone, man or woman, husband or wife, brother or sister who was near a dead body would have been seen as unclean, not only the widow. She also was not allowed to eat any food bought for the funeral ceremony. It is feared that she will die if she eats such foods. Hence, her food during the funeral ceremonies is cooked separately. So we see a mix of Torah, but also a mix of other practices. So the days before the burial of the man are always horrible for the widow, as she's made to stay in the same room with the corpse where she is required to be waving away flies from perching on the decomposing corpse. She is supposed to sit down and raise early in the morning and cry before anybody is awake, and this continues till the day the husband is buried. At the funeral, the widow is supposed to loudly cry, and if her cries are not loud enough, she can be punished by her husband's family. The widow was made to sit surrounded by family and to wail to prove her love for her husband. These are traditions that may not be practiced by Christian Igbos or modernized Igbos or even Igbos in Torah, because remember, some of this is from Torah, but some of it is a corruption. And I don't agree with all these practices. I'm just sharing some of how this Wailing Woman mourning tradition has been preserved by Hebrew tribes and also remixed with other practices. So I want to play a video of mourning women in Tanzania, just so we can all see this mourning and in action. And I know some of you also, had some of these, watched the video in preparation for this class, but I really want to show you another video as well from the sisters in Tanzania. So if you can see the passion that she's mourning with and wailing with. So we see the passion that this sister was mourning in. And so I wanted us to, again, to actually see how passionate and how undignified this wailing was. And this may have not been a professional wailer. This may have been, I think this was someone mourning for someone that she knew. But again, we want to make sure that we are truly being those wailing women and putting everything on the line while we wail and mourn. And so I just wanted to ask everyone, were you able to hear the video okay? If you could hear the video I just played, fine, let me know. Just put a 1 in the chat box if you could hear the video of the sister from Tanzania wailing. Before I play the Wailing Women of Ghana, I just want to make sure the sound is coming through. Can everyone hear? Could everyone hear the Tanzanian video? Okay, sorry about that. I hope, make sure the sound is coming. Sorry about the muffling. I hope the Ghana video is clearer. I'm going to play it now. Hold on one moment, and hopefully the Ghana video comes out better. And so these women, I think, knew the man that they were mourning from. He was a young man in the military that was actually, I think, doing some work at the mines, and he passed away or was killed, and it was a kind of controversial death. And so, though there are professional mourning women, there are also, sisters who are just mourners for people they know. And because he was young, this was very traumatic for the community, and even in the um, in the news. And so I just wanted to show you in the flesh some examples of mourning women in Africa. One other example of the power of praying women that I think many of you learned about in our Etzer Kenegdo class were the Muslim and the Christian women of Liberia, who during the Civil War, they prayed and fasted, including fasting from having sex with their husbands to get the Civil War to stop. The Civil War stopped. It's featured in a film called Pray the Devil Back to Hell, which you can watch online. You can order the DVD. They also got a woman elected as president, but they give her a grade every year because they told her just because you're a woman doesn't mean we're going to let you get off. But they stopped a war in their country. Even though they may not be in Torah, look at what they did. Now imagine what we could do if we could come together in unity in this mourning, this wailing, and this crying out to Yah and fasting. So, though some may be offended by professional mourners, this tradition did exist in ancient Israel with older women training the younger. Hebrews carried this tradition further into Africa, though it has been changed due to interactions with other nations, colonialism, and slavery. African Americans have even continued this tradition, and I once learned a few years ago that there are some African women from a nation that lost slaves that go to the sea and cry for those of us who were taken into slavery. Of course, that will not be reported in the news because that wouldn't fulfill their agenda of separating us. Again, it should be noted even in Asian and Arab countries, as well as even Greece, that professional mourners exist. But this makes sense since Hebrews interacted with Asians, Arabs, and Greeks. The mourning woman tradition may have not started with Hebrews, but from Jeremiah it is clear that this tradition is one we can employ with sincerity when our nation is experiencing physical or spiritual death. All mourning or wailing women are supposed to weep passionately, loudly, and sincerely. When we examine Hebraic prayer, these aspects are very important to being heard by Yah. So an African American example of these paid mourners is from Golden Gate Funeral Home in Fort Worth, Texas. You see this Black American family is here. And what we should know is in African American history, many people went into the mortuary business because it was one of the few businesses where Black people could excel during segregation, because many white morgues did not want to handle Black bodies, did not want us in their graveyards. So many Black families took on this tradition or this field of having mortuary businesses. So this was featured on a reality show called The Best Funeral Ever, and they hire paid mourners who are trained and paid for their services. If you go online and type in this funeral home in YouTube, I think you can even see a video of a sister trying out to be a mourning woman. The funerals are described as being most like the traditional African American homegoing celebrations, but more so. And we know how we do with our homegoings. And you see how the African family do. So though we're made to feel we're so separate, we're so different, trust me, y'all, we are a lot more alike than we are different. Mr. John Beckwith, Chief Executive Officer of the funeral home, states that although the paid mourners can be requested, it's not currently an active program. So, you don't have to have them at your funeral, but this family does have them available. And so when we look at the context of Jeremiah 9, I want to just describe what is happening before he calls the wailing women. Jeremiah is a prophet that is written about in the book of Jeremiah and Lamentations. And Lamentations is just a fancy word for sad songs. The prophet Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. Some say that, he might have struggled with depression. And Jeremiah's ministry was active from the 13th year of King Josiah, king of Judah, until after the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of Solomon's temple in 587 BC. This period spanned the reigns of 5 kings of Judah: Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. Y'all, I don't know. I'm hard with these names. It's hard for my tongue to get it, so bear with me. When Israel was defeated by Babylon and the temple was destroyed, we have to realize that in the Hebrew psyche, they believed the very spirit of Yah, the Ruach HaKodesh, dwelled in the temple. This is where you go to dedicate your baby. This is where your husband goes 3 times a year to give the offerings. This is where you go to get your sin forgiven. If your husband accuses you of adultery, this is where you go. This is where your atonement for your very soul happens during Yom Kippur or Day of Atonement. Now imagine the very place that you think Yah's spirit dwells being destroyed and razed to the ground. It's almost as if you would think Yah is dead if such a thing could happen. So we have to really think about how devastating this time is. When Jeremiah calls for the wailing women, this is like one of the lowest times for the Hebrew people. The exile of the 10 northern tribes have already happened, so that trauma's there. And now the last few tribes left are defeated. Jeremiah was a very wise man to call the wailing women. And he shows that our male Hebrew leaders have to get to a point of having broken hearts, not just anger for our people, before they can recognize the value of and the need to call the wailing women. The prophet Jeremiah teaches us that there is prophetic power in our tears. Remember, Israel is defeated by Babylon during Jeremiah's ministry. So put yourself in the shoes of a Hebrew witnessing the destruction of the temple, the carrying away of your nobles and your kings. And now you have the context of Jeremiah 9. When we look at the book of Lamentations, which can kind of be read in tandem with the book of Jeremiah, and I would suggest you read both, it's actually a national lament in which, as is common in laments, the poet repeatedly appropriates a female persona, singing as if a woman. My children are forlorn, for the foe has prevailed, in Lamentations 1:16. This was composed in response to the destruction of Jerusalem at the hands of the Neo-Babylonian army. Lamentations chronicles a nation's effort to know itself in the aftermath of a profound severing of its relation to Yah, the divine principle that confers meaning upon the social order. And in this book, the catastrophe is repeatedly gendered as a woman. So the Zion in Israel is described as a woman. The 12 tribes that are being prepared for Yeshua and for the end times are described as the bride of Messiah. And we remember that from the ancient Hebraic marriage class. But even defeated Israel is described as a woman. In light of that, think about the condition of the so-called Black woman or Hebrew woman now. So Lamentations opens with a clusters of images showing Jerusalem as an abandoned woman. Listen to this. She's variously referred to as a slave, a fallen princess, and a woman. And Al-Mena, a term Alan Mintz points out, designates so much a woman who has lost her husband as the social status of a woman who has no legal protector and who may thus be abused with impunity. So Israel is now a woman with no protection who will be abused with impunity. What happened to Hebrew women in slavery? They defeated our man and held back our man while we were abused with no impunity. Who sees the connections? If you see the connections between the fallen Israel and the Hebrew woman, especially in slavery, just put a 1 in the chat box if you can see that connection. Indeed, almanah may etymologically be linked to the Hebrew word meaning to be mute or dumb, with the letters aleph, lamed, and mem. This association deepens our sense of the widow as one who cannot speak on her own behalf. The distinction is central to Lamentations, where the daughter of Zion is represented, especially in the first chapters, as virtually all body, broken, and disabled. So again, this silencing of the daughter of Zion as a widow does not show that we are returning to our Hebrew culture, but it shows how broken our Hebrew culture is. So this call for the daughters of Zion to not have a voice and be silent is to actually keep us in the status of a widow with no man and no immunity. So some brothers who are calling us to be silent are actually in some ways saying we still don't have the protection of our Hebrew man. So we have to really look at how Israel is being described in Lamentations. Read that, sisters, because that depiction of fallen Israel is actually our condition now. What state is the so-called Black or Hebrew woman in today? And that does not mean we stay in that position, because through Yahshua and his Ruach, we have hope that we can rise above that widowhood status. But I also want us to see where we are as women and as a nation, so we get to that brokenness that is needed to be a wailing woman. And when I say the connection, I'm not saying that we can't be more than broken in Yahshua, but I'm talking about the connection of what we went through in slavery and the connection to what Israel went through when it was defeated by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Romans. And all of this is actually personified as a woman. So yes, in Yahshua, we can be strong, we can be courageous, we can have a voice. But I need us to see that we have also what we have been through as sisters during these captivities, because many times we only hear about what the brothers have gone through. So, and if you're getting emotions now, it is okay. We're going to close in prayer and have time for questions. Through Yah, we have the victory, and through Yah, we have voices, and through Yah, our nation is being awakened and built up. But we also have to see where we are. When this happens, for some, Yah is dead. Now, of course, Yah has no beginning and no ending. Yah cannot literally die. But I'm trying to get us in the mindset of how this destruction of the temple by Babylon made the Hebrew people feel. So you can see the condition our nation was in when Jeremiah called for the wailing women. Because wailing women played a therapeutic role in society. The wailing women in Jeremiah chapter 9 also played a prophetic role. During the dark days of Judah's apostasy, when deception was rife, the only people who listened to Yah and the prophet Jeremiah were the wailing women. Many people of that day did not listen to Jeremiah. They thought he was crazy. Yah gave the wailing women a message, and he authorized them to proclaim this message in his name. The term comforter is to be found in Lamentations chapter 1, verse 2, verse 9, verse 16, verse 17, verse 21, and Isaiah 51:12, and is the technical mourning ceremony vocabulary for a friend who is expected to give the mourner comfort and advice. The Isaiah passage points to the only one that can comfort Jeremiah, Yah. But remember that Yahshua called the Ruach the comforter. Yahshua says in John 14:26, but the Comforter, which is the Ruach HaKodesh, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. Remember, if you've been in our past courses, the Ruach HaKodesh is a feminine term in the Hebrew. And in the book of Proverbs, women are associated with wisdom. Jeremiah calls for the mourning women, the cunning women, or the wise women to come and wail over dead Israel killed by Babylonian captivity. Mourning women and wailing women also served as comforters for the mourning. So again, we see the woman's connection to the Ruach HaKodesh as a wise woman and as a spirit of comfort. Without wisdom and empathy, you cannot be a wailing woman. It takes wisdom to really look dead on at where our nation is, but not be defeated by what you see. And you also have to have empathy for our people in our fallen state. You need that. If you want to live in a la-la land and not see where we truly are as a people, your heart will never be broken and contrite enough to call out to Yah. But if you want to judge our people so harshly and never look at what they've been through, you're not going to have the empathy to have a broken and contrite heart to call out to Yah. So when we break down Jeremiah chapter 9, verses 17 to 26, we see some key terms. Sisters, are you still with me? Just put a 1 in the chat if you're still with me as we go into the breakdown. And this may be heavy, but trust me, there's an encouraging message on the other side. So if you're still with me, just press 1. Mourning women, cunning women. When we look at these terms in Jeremiah, we see that Eastern funerals were and are attended by mourners, chiefly women hired for that purpose. Wailing was reduced to an art, and they practiced it with cunning. There are mourners that go about the streets, those that are skillful of lamentation, those that mourn for Jehoiakim, those that wept and wailed greatly. Again, this is not just something you do with emotionalism, but this is something that takes skills. Consider ye and call for the mourning women. Jeremiah is considering the evil circumstances. He's calling us to consider the evil circumstances we are in, which call for mourning and lamentation. And since you yourselves are not sufficiently affected with the dangers that threaten you, send for those women whose profession it is to mourn at funerals and upon other sorrowful occasions, and let their lamentations excite sorrow in you. If the wailing women of Israel don't stand up, our brothers will not be able to feel the empathy and the spiritual insight over the condition of our people to do their work. The prophets seem here to compare the Hebrew state to a dead person and going to be buried, and therefore calls upon the people to send for those who used to be hired to make lamentations and wailings at funerals. Think of the dry bones of Ezekiel 37. Think of what Ezekiel sees. That is what Jeremiah sees. But in response, Jeremiah calls the wailing women. In response, Yah tells Ezekiel the Ruach's gonna revive the bones. Prophetic whirlwind is not because I'm a prophetess. Prophetic whirlwind is Yah's Ruach waking up the dry bones. So in both sides, we see that feminine. So according to biblical Hebrew professor, Dr. Will Daphne, a sister that you should all get familiar with, she is in the academy, but she knows who we are as a people. She says the ancient Near East, there was a profession that was passed down from woman to woman, from neighbor woman to a girlfriend. The initiates or trainees were called daughters, and the guild directors were called mothers, just as the disciples of prophets were called their children. It was the mourners guild called the kneeling or weeping women in Jeremiah. They were trained and paid to perform the public ritual of funerals. They were funeral directors and grief counselors. So again, you cannot be a wailing woman in isolation. You have to have other sisters. And many of us, because of hurt and pain, we can't call someone else a mother. But there are mothers in Israel. The only way you're going to be a wailing woman is in community. And this was passed on from mothers to daughters. So if you can't call anyone mother, it's going to be very hard for you to be a true wailing woman. These women walked with the body, wept and wailed with the family, and sang and chanted hymns, psalms, and laments composed for the occasion. They created space and community for the family and friends to grieve without embarrassment and never be alone. Some included musicians and men and women, but usually were women. In this Jeremiah text, the sound of weeping and wailing breaks forth from Zion, the heart of Yah's home in Jerusalem. The city of peace has been torn to pieces. The first stanza of the funeral hymn composed by Yah in Jeremiah speaks of the shame of being run out of the promised land that Yah provided. When their tabernacles were overthrown, they had to leave because there was nothing left for them anymore. Even Yah lost the tabernacle of the temple. For some of the loss of the tabernacle was the loss of the sanctity of their bodies. When the Babylonians marched in, as the Romans and the Assyrians, many Hebrews were raped, tortured, and killed, just like when we were taken off into the transatlantic and trans-Saharan slave trades, and even the colonialism that happened in places like the Congo. For others, the tabernacles lost were the sacred spaces of their Yah-given homes. They even came into Hebrews' homes. Violence and warfare have always affected women in a particularly intimate manner. So what we go through, our ancestors have gone through, and we got to get to a point of crying out to Yah so these captivities stop. These women were called to mourn for the dead of Israel, and they had to be wise. Remember, wisdom was associated with the woman in Proverbs 8, and the Ruach HaKodesh is a feminine term. This is a call to the daughters of Zion from Yah through Jeremiah. But it's not just a call for the past, but for today. Jeremiah 9:19, today we are not in Israel. We are scattered to the four corners in exile. We live in shame, like this verse states, because we don't have our land, name, or culture as Hebrews. Yes, we're waking up, but we're not back in Zion. Jeremiah 9:20 says, teach your daughters to wail. So who are the older women who will teach the younger women to cry out for Israel? When we break down this verse, I'm going to show you how real it is in our current situation. When we read Jeremiah 9:21, we read, death has climbed in through our windows and has entered into our fortified houses. It has removed the children from the outside and the young men from the streets. Death has climbed into our windows and entered our homes. Botham, Jean, Shem. Shem, that's what Hebrews are, was killed by a cop in his own home. And last summer in Sacramento, a brother was killed in his backyard by a cop. Whose homes is death creeping into? It says it has removed the children from outside and the young men from the streets. Which young men hang out on the street corner? Whose children are killed outside in Chicago in record numbers, in Compton, in East New York, Brooklyn? Whose young men are being removed from the street corners? I want to say who? Yes, you can find people of other races, but overwhelmingly who? It's the Hebrew children and the Hebrew men that are being taken out of their own homes and removed from the streets, and even Hebrew women. Now, when we read Jeremiah 9, verses 23 to 24, it says, this is what Yah says. Let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast of their strength, or the rich boast of their riches. But let the one boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am Yah, who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares Yah. It will not be wisdom, learning, conferences, books, strength, yelling on the street corners, or governments that will deliver our people, but the tears, wailing, weeping, prayers, and fasting of the mothers and daughters of Zion. All of the above are good, and I participate in conferences, and I have a book coming out, and I've marched on the streets. But Yah wants our broken hearts first. And yes, sisters, you can't be overcome by the grief. And counseling and prayer and therapy are all the ways to deal with the grief. We have to balance the grief of our people's situations with the hope and the joy of Yah, which is our strength. And the Ruach, the spirit of wisdom, will give us the ability to balance being a wailing woman and being a woman of joy. That's why we need the Ruach, and we need community so we are not overtaken by the grief. Jeremiah chapter 9, verses 25 to 26 says, the days are coming, declares Yah, when I will punish all who are circumcised only in the flesh, Egypt, Yehuda, Edom, Ammon, and Moab, and all who live in the wilderness in distant places. For all these nations are really uncircumcised, and even the whole house of Israel is uncircumcised in heart. This is a weird way to end this scripture about wailing women. But what Ruach showed me is this last verse is about sincerity. So you could be circumcised physically. You could be keeping the Sabbath and the feast physically. But if you don't have a sincere heart turned towards Yah, if you have not been redeemed through Yahshua and have a real connection with Yah, you won't be heard by him. We need sincerity in our wailing, prayer, and even when we follow the commandments, if you are not real with Yah, He cannot and will not answer your prayers. The commandments are not enough if our hearts are not broken and sincere. And having a broken heart just means you see the reality of your own sin, the sin of our people, but you're turning to Yah to get healing from that broken heart. Some Hebrews get the broken heart and they never return to Yah, and they stay stuck in anger, and they never turn that anger into the wailing and the prayer for our deliverance. Jeremiah 31:15. So we went through Jeremiah 17, but there is a connection between the wailing women of Jeremiah 9 and our foremother Rachel in Jeremiah 31:15. And we also hear this scripture in Matthew when Yeshua and other Hebrew boys are being hunted down. Jeremiah 31:15 says, well, this is what Yah says: a voice is heard in Ramah, mourning and great weeping, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. These are the words of Yah: cease your loud weeping, shed no more tears. There shall be a reward for your toil. They shall return from the land of the enemy. You shall leave descendants after you. Your children shall return to their own land. Sisters, this is the hope. Though Rachel is weeping, though Rachel's children are carried into exile, the hope that we know, you have to know in your heart and have a revelation that we will be put in our own land. Even if you are not alive and have to be resurrected to see it, and your great-grandchildren see Zion. You have to have a hope in the resurrection and a hope in our restoration. Some of us, we say we're Hebrew, but we have to keep learning, and people have to keep proving we don't have a revelation inside. Rachel weeping for her children is key, because Rachel is one of the matriarchs that helped birth Israel. In Jeremiah 31:16, Yah tells Rachel her tears are actually good, and due to this mother's grief, her children in exile will return. There is a divine activating power that comes from a Hebrew mother's tears. Jeremiah calls for the wailing and they cry. Rachel represents a mourning mother of Zion, and her tears, or the wailing woman's tears, activate the exiled Hebrews' return. There is nothing like a mother's tears. When Hannah cried before Yah, she got Samuel. It wasn't just the promise she made to dedicate him to Yah, it was her tears. When Rachel cries, it activates our exile, but our exile is like how many years after? It activates our return from exile. It is something that when we cry as the daughters and mothers and sisters of Zion, we will actually move Yah's heart. In the Exodus, when the Hebrews cried out, that was what made Yah rise up Moses for a deliverer and deliver the Hebrew people. And if Moses didn't answer the call, Yah would have rose someone else up. We're talking about the 400 years, and that is great. But if we don't take this period to wail and cry, we might miss the opportunity to activate our liberation. And I'm not saying this 2019 thing is one thing or another, but what I am saying is our tears, not just the brothers teaching, not just the conferences and the YouTube videos, but our prayers and our sincere cries to Yah will actually move Yah. I want to encourage everyone to listen to Rabbi Akwete Ahmad's teaching Miss Messiah, where he has a segment about Rachel's tears and what they mean. It's really deep. And it also talks about the mother trap that I feel many African American women especially, but all over the world fall into. Our tears, in Revelation, it says Yah is actually collecting our tears, and that our tears will be avenged. Why are tears important? Well, when we look at the Hebrew word tefillah, it's generally translated into English as the word prayer. But this word alone is not an accurate translation, for to pray means to beg, beseech, implore, and the like, for which we have a number of Hebrew words which more accurately convey this meaning. Now, tefillah is very important because it means to self-evaluate. A part of Hebraic prayer is evaluating yourself before Yah, but it's also crying out with passion. Hebrew prayer includes sincerity, a recognition of your total dependence on Yah, and your total concentration on Yah. Example, I love Yah because he hears my voice in my prayer for mercy, because he bends down to listen. I will pray as long as I have breath. Death wrapped its ropes around me. The terrors of the grave overtook me. I saw only trouble and sorrow. Then I called on the name of Yah. Please, Yah, save me. Psalms 116, 1-4. Read the Psalms. When I was 10 and Yah led me to pray and read the word without anyone taking me to church, I stayed in the Psalms. And I think reading that grief as a foster child really helped me. The sadness or grief over our people's conditions can cause us to cry out like Rachel or the wailing women. And these tears and prayers can move the hands of Yah. When we look at the sons of Sadok, they're a family of priests and Cohens descended from Sadok, the first high priest in Solomon's temple. But Sadoks are associated with a high level of integrity and justice. They are like the cream of the crop of Levites. The sages, which is just a fancy way of saying our Hebrew ancestors, says Sadoks always hold the sadness of their people inside of them, even when their people are joyful, because we are not restored to our land. So there is a way in Yah to balance the sorrow for your people and also the joy. And we're not to we're not to be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by good. So we should not be overcome by this grief, but we should just use it to have a realistic view of where we're at. So we're humble and we're constantly crying out to Yah. Another part of Hebrew prayer is a cry of deep distress, Sach. Yah didn't see the affliction of our fathers in Egypt and heard us their cry, Sach, by the Red Sea, and didst divide the sea before them so that they went through the midst of the sea on the dry land. Nehemiah 9, verses 9-11. So when we have this deep cry of distress, it can part seas. Then to cry out for help, Zach, Hebrew. When the Israelites could not find fresh water in the wilderness, Moses cried, he tzach unto Yah, and Yah showed him a tree, which he had cast into the waters, and the waters were made sweet. Exodus 15:25. So if we cry out to help, again, miracles can happen. Or the type of cry when you call with a loud sound, para, and we saw that in some of the videos. In 1 Chronicles 4:10, we see that, Jabez was granted a blessing when he cried out with a loud cry, or to shout a war cry, ruah. Then the men of Yehuda gave a shout, ruah, and as the men of Yehuda shouted, it came to pass that Yah smote Jeroboam and all of Israel. In 2 Chronicles 13:15. Sometimes we got to do warfare prayers, have warfare cries. And we don't wrestle or war against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. Then we have the cry for help, Shabbat, Hebrew. He will fulfill the desire of them that fear him. He will also hear their cry, Shabbat, and will save them. Psalm 145:19. And then we have the deep cry of distress, the Sequah. He forgot not their cry of the humble. Sometimes when you're in distress, you just have to cry out to Yah. So just my personal experience with this, though I don't know what it's like to be taken into exile into another land, as a child, I lived through being ripped from my mother and carried away from my family. I lived through that grief, and it was only a small part of what I imagine the Hebrews went through in the time of Jeremiah being carried off into Babylon, or when our ancestors were carried from Africa. When I would cry as a child, I didn't know it at the time, but I would feel the Ruach ministering to me, letting me know that he heard me and that he was taking my tears into account. And in some way, because of what I went through as a child, because of those tears that I cried, and now seeing certain blessings in my life, I understand Rachel's tears. When my mother lost me as a 7-year-old and my little brother as a 10-month-old, the mourning for her children has never ended to this day. I ask you to pray for my mother, Julie. Yet today, all of my mother's children are believers. Could this be why? Could Yah have been moved by her tears because no one knows how this woman, who was an avowed atheist, has all children believers and two in ministry. And I understand my mother's grief, because how could a mother ever be okay while her children are in exile? How can we as mothers, sisters, and daughters of Zion be okay while our people are exiled and divided? Yes, his joy is our strength, but our tears can move Yah's heart and move his hands. It is time for the wailing women of Zion to feel the pain and despair of our exile, not to the point of being depressed, but to the point of desperate crying out to Yah with all of our hearts. During the Egyptian captivity, when we cried out to Yah, he delivered us. It is not time for us to be bitter, angry, or silly women, but us to be wise, sincere, and passionate to the point of looking foolish to the world and weeping for our people. The prophets and leaders of Israel need Rachel's tears, and they need us to be wailing women. When we look at Rachel again, there's something deep that's broken down. After dying in childbirth with Benjamin, Rachel was buried at Bethlehem. Jacob chose to bury her there while they were traveling rather than transport her body to the ancestral burial place in the cave of Machpelah at Hebron. And this is a surprising decision. It was actually not that far to transport her to the ancestral burial place, especially since Jacob and Joseph's coffins would later be brought all the way to Egypt. Well, the midrash of the sages tell us that Rachel was intended to be buried at Bethlehem. But her being in transit where she was buried represents the exile of the Hebrew people. She will wait on the road crying out to Yah on our behalf, asking him to bring her children home. Remember the prophecy of Jeremiah 31:15-17? As Rachel's prayers brought her childlessness to an end, her tears will at last bring our exile to an end. We are Rachel's bloodline descendants. We are Rachel and Rachel is us. And so our tears can help end our captivity. It is not by men's merit that Yah will bring us home, but it will be when we cry out to Yah like in the Exodus, when our Hebrew ancestors cried out. Rachel is buried in Bethlehem until our exile is over. But Yeshua, who ends our spiritual exile and separation from Yah, is born in Bethlehem. Do we see the connection between Rachel's tears and not only our physical exile ending, but our spiritual exile ending? So our call to be wailing women today. I truly believe that Yah needs our mourning, weeping, and tears like never before. I believe it's just a remnant of Hebrew women and women who sojourn with Israel, who are born again, filled with the Ruach, redeemed by Yah back to Yeshua, come together and cry out with broken and contrite hearts that our nation will be turned around. Many Hebrews have been calling times of prayer from this summer, but we as daughters of Zion must do more. We must have broken hearts over our people. Do you look at our nation as you would your dead mother, husband, or child? The sorrow that I carry around being ripped from my mother at 7, and Yah has healed me of a lot of that. But I'm happy that I still remember and carry a little bit of that sorrow because it helps me empathize with others. But do I have that type of sorrow over the separation of the Hebrew people in this exile? Psalm 51:17 says, the sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O Yah. If we have a broken and repentant heart, not a defeated and depressed heart, but broken and repentant, meaning we're willing to do a 360-degree turn with our sin to get rid of it, Yah will hear us. So sisters, who will answer this call to be wailing women tonight? If you will answer the call, just put, here I am, Yah, in the comments. And sometimes I heard sisters say wailing out for others has always been easier. Sometimes we also have to wail and cry out for ourselves. And so I want to just share how wailing women may look in real life. Because for me, it's not about knowledge. It's not about always looking to our past. Some black people, so-called black people, Hebrew people, we're always looking at the pyramids, Mansa Musa, what Rachel did, what Esther did. And that is great, but only to get inspiration to get up and do something today through the power of the Ruach. And thank you for everyone who's saying, here I am, y'all. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, sisters. Even though this is online, we can really, if we mean what we're typing, y'all can reach us. So in October 2015, we took the call to be wailing women and brought it into our modern situation. October 2015 in South Carolina, a young Hebrew girl whose mother and grandmother's death left her in foster care was body slammed by a cop for refusing to stop playing with her cell phone. And that was caught on tape. You see a picture of it. I'm not going to mention her name because her name is not really online and we want her to be able to move on with her life. She's not only this incident, and her photo is not in this presentation. Just pray for her. Y'all knows her name. In response to this incident and many other incidents of cops beating and killing our people on film, my friend Minister Siobhan McKay and I started the Wailing Women Prayer Call, and that's where we had the hashtag Wail for Black Sisters. With the permission of Minister McKay, who we honor for answering this call, Mother Malaka revived these calls in the spring of 2018, and from this, the prayer challenges were born. So every Thursday, we have Wailing Women prayer calls, and we've done prayer challenges and fasting and actions. Not to say that we're at this level of the Wailing Women of Zion that Jeremiah called. No, we're striving. But I just share that even with a friend, with a small group of people, with a large group of people, in your room, in your prayer closet, in your car driving to work, you can start to be a Wailing Women. So in about September 2018, Women of the Whirlwind Prayer Ministry was born, led by Mother Malaka, and it includes our sisters Dawn Davis Goldsboro, Monica Amuna Coppage, Sister Tanya Rich, and Sister Yiska Wells. And I thank them for their prayers, for praying for other leaders in Israel, for moderating this chat. It is a blessing to actually have prayer warriors a part of this ministry because I need it and we all need it. And they don't only pray for me or Prophetic Whirlwind, they'll pray for anybody. This ministry is dedicated to ministering to Hebrews and those who sojourn with us through collective and one-on-one prayer, as well as prayer and action challenges. So we don't just pray, but we may journal, we may watch teachings, we may walk. And I'm just sharing this, we would love for you to join and pray with us and do challenges. We're going to have a future challenge on Hebraic womanhood. But even if you don't ever join us, you can start Wailing Women prayer in your community. If everyone on this call started Wailing Women prayer gatherings once a month, 4 times a month, every other week, and we truly have broken and contrite heart, we would see miracles like the parting of the Red Sea happen for Israel. So I want to, again, bring in Mother Malaka to share a little bit about some rules of engagement before you answer the call to be a wailing woman through prayer. Today, you don't have to go get trained by Goldsboro Funeral Home in Fort Worth, Texas to be a wailing woman. You can answer the call of being a wailing woman through prayer for yourself and your community and your nation. But you can't just run up to Yah. You wouldn't just run up to, Meghan Markle as a princess in England. There's some protocols so that our wailing is heard before Yah. And so I'm going to call Mother Malaka to just give some testimonies and talk about the rules of engagement for Wailing Women prayer. And to learn more, you can go to Prophetic Whirlwind and type Women of the Whirlwind Prayer Ministry. Just click that tab. But I'm going to call Mother Malaka because we don't want to just learn, but we want to talk about how to do this in real life. We're the people of the book, so we're living out the book. So just give me a moment for Mother Malaka.
Shalom.
Shalom, sis. So I'm going to just turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the rules of engagement for prayer and just share some testimonies that have come out of the Wailing Women prayer.
Hallelujah. It's important when we come before the Father to remember that although He is our Father, He's Abba, He's the King. He's the King of creation. He's the King of the universe. And He holds all power in His hand. And just like we would approach an earthly king with reverence and respect, and in the manner in which the earthly king is requiring of us, how much more so should we approach the King of all things in a manner in which He requires? I think often, and I share often about the scriptures in Isaiah 58, the whole chapter of Isaiah 58, one of my favorite chapters in the scripture, where God is speaking to His people, and He's telling them, your appointed days, your feasts, your celebrations make me sick. And I'm paraphrasing. But He says, the way that you're approaching me, I can't stand. I despise it. And what He goes on to say is that the people cry out to Him with a loud voice, but their hearts are far from Him. And this is where the sincerity of heart comes in, that the only love is speaking about. God says how He knows that our heart is sincere is by how we treat others, how we walk in relationship. He says in Isaiah 58, you are oppressing people. You're accusing people. You don't care when you see someone hungry. You don't care when you see someone without a home. You don't care when you see the naked. And because of this, I don't hear you. And so when we are approaching the King of heaven, we have to have examined our heart. Tefillah means self-evaluation. To examine our heart and to come before Him as the judge that He is, recognizing that we've all fallen short, we've all sinned, we've all done things that were displeasing to Him. We have to be willing to recognize what we've done, agree with Him that what we've done has been wrong, and then throw ourselves on His mercy. Kneeling before Him, humbling ourselves, our intellect, our will, so that we can then be forgiven, because He desires to forgive us. When we've been forgiven, then we turn from what we have been doing, and we testify, we fix it. So if I've been ignoring people who are in need, I want to turn from that, and I want to begin to give what I can and what I have to those who are in need. I want to remember those who are homeless. Maybe I don't have the ability to bring them into my home, but I can do something. I can help them with a resource. I can give to something that I know is going to help them find a home. And you understand what I'm saying about turning our attention to those who are least among us, because these are the ones that are on the most high heart. So we come to Him with a humble and a contrite heart, looking at what others need, looking to fulfill His desire and how we care for others. And then I want to add on to that what Yeshua told us about forgiveness. He was asked, how many times must I forgive my brother or someone who sins against me? And Yeshua said 70 times 70 in one day. So when I'm coming before the King, He's going to look at my heart better than I look at my heart before I present it to Him. Our father David said, examine my heart, O Yah, and if there be any crooked or perverse way in me, fix it, straighten it. Lead me in the path of everlasting. Create in me a clean heart, O Yah, and renew a right and steadfast spirit in me. That's how we self-evaluate. That's tefillah. Is there someone I haven't forgiven? Is there someone I'm holding bitterness toward? Am I saying with my mouth I forgive them, but when I see them, I have something happen in my heart, that twinge in my heart that lets me know there's still really something there? I have to daily self-evaluate. My relationship with the Father is a daily relationship where I am continuously coming before Him, self-evaluating, looking to see what it is I need to adjust or align, because that's what He requires of me in order for me to enter into His presence. So, I hear people sometimes say, oh, God knows my heart, that we're good. And we just kind of have this homeboy mentality sometimes. How Kanye West say, Jesus is my homie. And we just kind of have that irreverent attitude. And one of the first things that was restored to me when I came out of religious tradition, one of the first things restored to me was a reverence for the kingship of Yah, and an understanding that I have to approach him in his prescribed manner. He says in Psalms, I believe it's 27, who can ascend to the hill of Yah? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. So these are some things that we want to think about in terms of how we engage him when we come to him in prayer. Have we helped our brothers? Have we done what we can for those who are in need? Have we forgiven? Have we forgiven over and over and over? Forgiveness is a process. Sometimes I have to cast down thoughts daily regarding things that happened in the past. The scripture tells me to cast down every thought, to bring down every thought that exalts itself against the knowledge of the Most High, and bring into submission every thought that would cause me to be disobedient to the pure. And so it's a daily process. Forgiveness is daily. Helping others is daily. And if I will do these things, he says in Isaiah 58, he promises that while you're yet praying, he will hear your call and answer you. So there's so much more we could say about how we approach the Father, but I think that I've said enough. I encourage you to go to Isaiah 58, to read that and to meditate on it, and to really hear the heart of the Father. If he's speaking directly to us, to our ancestors and to us, about what he desires from us. And if we'll do these things, he says he'll answer our prayer. He'll be pleased with our feet and our moed. He'll be pleased with our Shabbat. And so those are what we call the rules of engagement. Approaching the Father with a pure heart and clean hands. I want to tell you some really wonderful testimonies that we've had from the Wailing with the call. I get prayer requests. It's through various messages. Sometimes through Messenger or Facebook, sometimes through emails. And whenever I get a prayer request, I take it to my personal prayer time, but I also will oftentimes bring it to the Wailing with the call. And most recently, I had a prayer request from a brother named Mike, who lives in South Africa. And he had gotten information to contact me through watching Rebirth Ministry. And Mike wrote to us, this was at the beginning of our very first Facebook prayer challenge. And he asked us to pray for him because he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And he also had some financial issues going on. So we began to pray for him. And back then, during that challenge, it was a 30-day challenge. We prayed for him every day. And then the next challenge was a 7-week challenge. We prayed for him every week. And then on to the Wailing Women calls on Thursday night. We continuously kept his name in prayer. I just got an email from Mike last week telling us that he went back for blood work and for your analysis, and there was no cancer.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah, y'all.
Hallelujah.
Can we just praise y'all even in the chat?
Hallelujah.
Just praise him for that healing from prostate cancer. Hallelujah.
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 Hallelujah. Praise the Father.
Hallelujah.
And we've had other testimonies. We've had testimonies of folks being filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, receiving spiritual strength as they go through a crisis. We've had testimonies of healings and no need for surgery. We had a sister Elaine, who had us to pray for her son. They were going to go in and do surgery, go into his neck. And while they were prepping him for surgery, they discovered that he no longer needed the procedure because whatever was going on had healed. And so even the doctors were stunned and were praising the Father. So that was from a women's call. We've had testimonies of sisters who have been in financial crisis and received a breakthrough or received employment or received a check, and they had no idea that this was coming, and it saved them from a situation like home loss or the loss of a vehicle. And I could go on and on with the different testimonies, but the point is that Yah is hearing our cry, and He's responding to our cries. And there are literally times on that call when we cry, when we scream, when we call out to the Father over the state of His people. And so it's wonderful to know that this is a legacy that we have been given that's literally in our DNA, that God is utilizing, activating in us so that we can cry out to Him and He will hear us and He will turn our captivity. I would like to invite anyone who would like to join in with us on this call. It's on Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do have a pre-conference call, conference number. We will put that in a thread. If you have a problem accessing the phone number directly, you can download the app, freeconference.com. And when you have that app, it will create a window that you can then put the access code in, and it'll join you right into our call. So with that, I'm going to turn the line back over to Sister Jolie.
And thank you so much, Mother Malaka, for taking up the call to lead so many to the Father's throne. And thank you, Minister Siobhan McKay, for answering the call and still joining us. And thank you for all the sisters who answered the call to be Wailing women. I just wanted to, on the screen is the information about the weekly calls, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us. We're going to continue to do those calls and continue to cry out. And then when the next prayer challenge comes up, that will be on the Women of the Whirlwind prayer page, also sent out to, you're now all on the Ancient Hebraic Womanhood list. And if you're friends with any of us on Facebook, you'll see about the next challenge. We know many of us have ended the fall feast, or for my congregation, we're winding down with Sukkot starting this week, but we don't want to just get to the end of the fall feast and be like, whoo, yay, y'all, we paid attention to you for a few months. We want to come out of the fall feast going higher. Mother Malaka is available Sunday to Wednesday from 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for one-on-one prayer. Monday and Thursday from 9 to 10 p.m. and Tuesday to Wednesday from 8:30 to 9 p.m. Dawn, Tanya, Monica, Iska are also available, and we'll be getting their times up on the website, and they'll be posting it on social media. But all of these sisters are in the chat, so reach out to them. I just want to acknowledge Woman of Yah, because you mentioned that your son was shot 10 times, but he is still alive. And I want to just say hallelujah and praise Yah for that. I want to ask Woman of Yah that Yah just continue to heal and protect your son and comfort you. She is an example of a mother's tears preserving a child. If everyone could pray for Woman of Yah right now. She's going to have surgery for the lump on her back. The lump has gone down significantly, and the surgeon said to just monitor it. Can we just pray in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach that Woman of Yah is healed in Yeshua's name, that this lump would totally go down, or if it has to be surgically removed, that it will be an easy surgery. And Yah, we just ask that you heal Woman of Yah. We praise you and thank you for preserving her son in the name of Yeshua. Preserve her health right now. Remove any disease from her body, any cancer, and we just ask that you give her Dr. Wisdom in Yeshua HaMashiach's name. Hallelujah. So with that, continue to pray for our sister Woman of Yah. If you need prayer, hit up any of the moderators. My courses, like I said, are not just to learn more wisdom, but to actually do something. So I want to read a poem for our Hebrew foremothers by Tamar Frankel. Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, what are your blessings? Rebecca, woman of destiny, you would take destiny into your own hands. Rachel, woman beloved, your weeping on the road will bring us home. Leah, woman of mystery eyes, the world beyond is yours. Inside of us, you live on. We forge our lives from immalleable iron. We weep, we live twice born. We are very critical as daughters of Zion. These Hebrew foremothers are in us. Their DNA is in us. We are them and they are us. So what they did, Yeshua said we can do even greater. Rachel's tears brought the children of Israel back from Babylon. But Yeshua says we can even do greater. That means our tears can even spark the greater exodus. It said an exodus is going to occur that's going to blow the former exodus out of the water. So I'm not just telling you something to tell you. This is something you can grab onto today. So in conclusion, our Hebrew foremothers were called by Yah through the prophet Jeremiah to wail when our people were all but dead and defeated by Babylon. These were wise and skilled women who would cry out for our people. Our foremother Rachel cried for her exiled children, and her tears turned around our exile, and Yah said he would bring us back. And the Hebrews did come back from Babylonian captivity. We just went further into sin, so we had to have 70 AD. But there's a greater exodus promised. Hebrew women brought the wailing or mourning woman tradition further into Africa. What could our wailing and tears move Yah to do for us today as our people are scattered to the four corners of the earth? The wailing woman call is connected to the Etzer Kenegdo, which means not helpmate, but it means a spiritual rescuer, equal but opposite to man, in the Eshet Hayel, which is not just a virtuous woman, but a woman of valor, a woman of courage, or a woman of warfare. The wailing woman is an Etzer Kenegdo and an Eshet Hayel, and if you missed the Ancient Hebraic Womanhood series, you can go on Study with Prophetic Whirlwind and get it, and get those 3 courses where we go over those women plus Queen Mother Sarah and what she teaches us, because this is all connected. So will you accept the challenge to pray with sincerity, tears, weeping, and wisdom for this, what I hope and pray is the final captivity to end? Will you accept the challenge to pray and cry out for this final captivity to end? And so with that, I want to ask if there are any questions. And if there are any questions, just type them into the chat right now, and we will answer the questions. If you want to call in to ask a question, you call into 605-475-4721, access code 525512. So that's the Wailing Women. You can call into the Wailing Women prayer line, and I'll put you on speaker to ask a question, but also you can just ask a question in the chat, and then I will repeat it and answer it. Are there any questions or comments? And thank you so much for being with us tonight and just allowing me to share with you. Are there any questions? Any questions, sisters? And if you're going to call in, just put that in the chat so I can queue up the phone. But you can ask the questions right here. Any questions, any comments, any concerns about anything you hear? Thank you, Mother Malaka. So any questions or comments, sisters? So the time of uncleanness, Sister Do Life Club / Base Shop Master said the time in mourning was only 7 days in Israel. No, the time of uncleanliness, if you touch the dead body, was 7 days. But the time of mourning could be 7 days all the way up to, for Jacob and Joseph and those great patriarchs, it could be like 40 days. It could go on for months. It really depended on how prominent the person was. But if you touch the dead body, you were unclean for 7 days. And that was for men and women, which is why typically Hebrew funerals happen very quickly. And I know growing up that it was very bad if you didn't bury someone quickly. So if you're dealing with unforgiveness, I've dealt a lot with unforgiveness, especially around things happening in my childhood. Then the first prayer is just confessing to Yah that you're holding unforgiveness, asking Yah through his Ruach to give you the power to forgive. And then one thing I do, because being a Hebrew is about actions, not just feelings, I will say out of my mouth, through Yeshua HaMashiach, I forgive XYZ person, and then I will act as if I forgave them. Sometimes we have to do it and declare it, and then our feelings will manifest later. And you can be real with y'all, you can journal it, but physically say, I forgive that person. Almost make it like a task, like working out. You can get an empty chair and say everything you need to say to the person. That's another thing that you can do, and then say, in the name of Yeshua, I forgive you, and you continue to do that and pray over it and even pray for the person, and you will see that the forgiveness will come. And it's a process. When you feel the bitterness coming up again, just say, in the name of Yeshua, I reject that bitterness and I forgive the person. Just start declaring it with your mouth before you feel the emotions, and the emotions will follow. First the natural and then the spiritual. So if you want to sign up, hey Amanda Yahoo, hey sister. This is a sister that just got immersed on Sukkot. Sis, you can go to propheticworldwind.com and click on Study with Prophetic Whirlwind and sign up for the Ancient Hebraic Womanhood course. And I'll send you an email offline about that. And make sure to just text me your email. Woman of Yah, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for sharing so much realness with us tonight. We're going to pray everyone, whole Woman of Yah, in your prayers for her surgery. If you want to gain access to the previous classes, you go to propheticworldwind.com and you click on Study with Prophetic Whirlwind, and you can scroll down and sign up for the different classes. And sisters, if you can, moderators, if you can drop the Study with Prophetic Whirlwind link or the Prophetic Whirlwind link in the chat for the family, we would appreciate it. Oh, Michelle. Hey, shalom, Sister Michelle. Sister Michelle has a great financial jubilee program to help us get our finances in order. Definitely hit this sister up, because I know some of us, we welling over the debt we have. So take advantage of the sisters in the chat. Thank you, Minister Siobhan McKay. Thank you for all your prayers. Minister Siobhan McKay is a true wailing woman. She'll be fasting and praying for you, and you ain't even on a fast for yourself. That is a true sister, true mother in Zion, and I'm so happy to have her as a friend all the way from our Penn State crazy days. But we ain't gonna talk about that. I wasn't always Sister Prophetic Whirlwind. Don't make yourself cry. Sister Angela Israel asks, is there anything I can do to make myself cry? Don't make yourself cry. Just make sure that whatever you're praying to Yah for, you truly have a sincere and repentant heart around it. Some of us can easily cry and it's just emotions. Some of us may not cry, but our hearts may be broken and contrite. What we don't want to do, which is what we see sometimes in the church, is manufacture emotions. We just want to be a wailing woman by sincerely crying out to Yah, whatever that means for us. Good night, Rich Tanya, and thank you for helping us moderate. Tikwa Bat Zion, as far as wailing woman not being married, was that more so our customs or customs for other nations? So, sister, that was probably customs from other nations. Remember, it was in Egypt that it couldn't be women who were married or had children, but in Israel, you could be a wailing woman and be married and have children. So there's a lot of overlap between Egypt and us, but you can definitely be married and have children and be a wailing woman. Thank you so much, Sister Kelly. I'll go back. So let me know if this is the right slide. It says, will you accept the challenge to pray with sincerity, tears, weeping, and wisdom for this captivity to end? And I'm just going back to the past slide. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So, sisters, if there are no other questions or comments, I want to talk about next steps. It is very important that we don't just hear this as another piece of Hebrew history. I think sometimes we're getting heavy and we kind of getting full and obese over all the learning. It's a blessing. Like Daniel said, in the last days, knowledge are going to go to and fro. It is a blessing. All this knowledge is giving. Oh, so real quick for PhD for Yah, which I love. The previous courses are actually videos, and then you also get a syllabus of articles that in videos that you can watch pre-course and post-course. So you'll get a course video. Most course videos are 2 to 3 hours, and then you'll get a list of articles and books and videos to read while you're before you listen to the video and after you listen to the video. So thank you, Michelle, and you are a gift to the nation too, helping us get financially free. We're all a gift to the nation. It's not even about us, it's just about Yah. So for the next steps, when you got your course email, there was a post-course article about mourning among Akan women. Please read that as you're able. Tomorrow, I will be sending this PowerPoint and this video just to you women who signed up and to women who couldn't get on tonight but signed up, so you can listen to the replay anytime you want. I will also send a link to Restoring the Branches magazine fall issue, which Sister Kelly in this chat helps to produce, because Mother Malaka writes an article about Hebrew prayer that touches on some of what we shared tonight. You can read that for your edification. And then join us every week for Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and 7 p.m. Central Standard Time for the Wailing Women prayers, where we're calling out to Yah in real time. Also, I talked about the sisters in Africa, and I thank everyone who has donated to Operation Joseph. I know many of us have needs, but like the widow's mite, when we share the little we have, Yah will multiply it. So if you're able to donate to Hebrews in Africa, we're supporting a Hebrew women's group in Nigeria that's linked up to Hannah Sheem under Mayana Johnson, who's a Hebrew elder and wonderful teacher here in New York. And I'm just asking, even if you give $5, it can go so far in Africa, so we can continue to support our family who has all of this Hebrew culture that we need to preserve. And again, if you miss Ancient Hebraic Womanhood, where we go over the Eshet Hayel, the Etzer Kenegdo, and Sarah as our Queen Mother, you can sign up for that. If you want the class on Ancient Hebraic marriage customs, West African marriage customs, and the connection, because we West Africans and Africans in general are holding, unlike any other group on earth, the ancient Hebraic marriage customs and still doing them, and also how those marriage customs are discussed by Yahshua in reference to Yah's kingdom. You can sign up for those courses, and some of that information will connect with this one. And so what I'm going to do again is call Mother Malaka to close out in prayer. I want to thank you all for on a Sunday night staying with us and sojourning with us. Just for clarification, on the website you may see my book that prayerfully is coming out in December. That's not a course. That's just a book about African Hebrews, the good news of Yah and our family in America. But there's a whole course page. I really am humbled and thank you for spending your time with us. Keep me in your prayers, and let's keep each other in our prayers. Connect with each other offline. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, Yah is in the midst. If all of us who were on this course really took seriously being wailing women in our communities on the prayer calls, we could see miracles happen as we enter this 2019 season. As my friend Gilbert from Ghana, who's planning the 2019 year return trip to Ghana, told me, he said it's going to be our level of expectation and what we expect Yah to do that's going to determine what's going to happen in this year. And so, Sister TD Eve, now that you are on the prophetic whirlwind list, You should have received with this course a resource list about Hebrews in Africa. What I'm going to do is when the registration website is finished for the Ghana 2019 trip, where we're going to go and, celebrate and commemorate the 400 years and also talk about what we're going to do further and visit Hebrews in Africa and even build with non-Hebrew practicing people over there. When that website is up, I will share it because for those going to Ghana, they will get accurate information about dual citizenship. I say for anyone thinking about moving to Africa, you should pray, fast, and discern. I don't believe in flea doctrine. I'm not telling anyone to move because it's 2019. You need to get a call from Yah yourself. And I would say to anyone, visit first before you move. What I like about Ghana is they have African Americans who have been there for generations. They have right of abode. Their president is giving dual citizenship to those who are coming on the trip. And so if when since you're on my email list, you will get information about that trip. And then that trip will have more information about moving to Ghana. But the first thing is to pray about visiting and to make sure wherever you are, whether it's Africa, America, Europe, the Caribbean, that you know that is where Yah wants you to be. There'll be Jacob's trouble everywhere, but when we're in Yah's will, then we know we're right where he wants us. So everyone on this list will receive information about that trip as well. And you can ask me questions via email about Africa. So with that, I'm going to call and just have Mother Malaka close us out with prayer because we would be remiss to go through this call and this class and not pray.
Provided by freeconferencecall.com. Please enter your access code followed by the pound.
And so,
if you are the host, press star now. Otherwise, please wait, and you will be joined into the conference.
Okay, so Shalom, Mother Malaka, are you there?
Please announce yourself.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, sis. So just going to turn it over to you to close us out in prayer. And if anyone has questions past this, just contact us offline. You have my email. If we're friends on social media, feel free to contact us and we'll be willing to answer your questions. But right now, we're just going to go into a time of prayer so that we can close this time in Wailing Women prayer. Thank you all for being with us. We truly appreciate it. If you were late, you're going to get the replay video tomorrow, plus the PowerPoint, and you can start all the way from the beginning. And so with that, I'm turning it over to Mother Malaka to lead us in prayer.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Father, we just thank you. Abba, we are so grateful for the opportunity to hear your word, to know, Father, that you have instilled in us the tradition that activates our own deliverance. We thank you and we praise you for it, Father. You are so mindful of us. You are so merciful and so compassionate. Abba, we thank you and we praise you for tonight. We thank you for Sister Only Love. We thank you for the words that were spoken, Father. We thank you for the learning, for the understanding that was given. Father, I pray right now that nothing that we heard would be left here on the table. But Father, we would take it all and hide it in our hearts. Abba, I ask that you would help us, Father, to be inspired, to be motivated, Father. Stir us up in our Ruach HaKodesh, in our Ruach, in our spirit. Stir us up, Father, that we might be motivated to cry out to you. Father, open the eyes of our understanding that we might see the true condition of your people, of our people. Father, sometimes we are lulled into complacency by this the things that are available and accessible in captivity. Father, the ease with which we are able to live life sometimes lulls us into a sleep. But Father, we're asking that you would help us to stay awake. Father, that you would help us to be diligent. That you would give us fervency in our spirit, that we would come to you knowing, Father, that time is running short and that things are intensifying all around us and that now is not the season to slumber or to sleep or to be lulled into silence. Lulled into silence. But Father, now is the time to cry out. And so, Father, we cry out to you. Father, I pray that you would touch every person for tonight. Father, those who have the gift of prayer. Father, I pray that you would stir them up in their inner man. Father, that they would begin to wail before you. That they would come before you, Father, offering praise, offering thanksgiving, and asking for mercy and compassion for your people. Father, those who may not have a gift of prayer, but who have a desire to serve you in this way. Father, I pray that you endow them with the gift, that you pour it into them right now, Father, by the power of your Ruach HaKodesh. Father, I pray that you stir us up, Abba, that we would hear your voice, that we would recognize the seasons, that we would be drawn, Father, into deeper intimacy with you, that we would be drawn, Father, to wail before you on behalf of those who are in pain. Father, help us to have compassion. Make our hearts soft towards one another. Make our hearts pliable, Abba. Make our hearts tender towards you, Abba. Help us to delight ourselves in the things that matter to you, Father. You said, Father, that if we delight ourselves in you, that you would give us the desires of our heart. Father, we desire to be free. We desire the captivity of your people to be turned. We desire that our children would not be murdered in the streets. Father, we desire to be at one with you again, to be at one in our land again, to be safe, Abba, to be secure in you. Father, we cry out to you and we ask you to help us, Abba. Help us, Father. Help us to be useful to you. Help us, Father, to be useful to this awakening. Help us, Father, to be useful to our people. Abba, we pray that you heal the hurt that would keep us from having intimacy with you. Father, I pray that you would heal the things that get in between us. Take away, remove the barriers, Father. Those things that cause us to distrust you. Those things that cause us to doubt you. Those things that have made us numb. Father, we ask you to remove them. Touch us, Father. Touch us, heal, Father. Make us whole, Abba, that we might trust you, that we might cry out to you, that we might come before you, Father, knowing that you care. Abba, you said in your word that you know the number of tears we cry, that you keep it in a bottle. And so, Father, we know that you love us. Help us to perceive it with the eyes of our spirit. Help us to understand what the height, the depth, and width, the breadth of your love is towards us. And Abba, help us to see our true spiritual condition. Help us to see the true spiritual condition of our people. And when we see, Father, help us to be our brother and our sister's keeper. Help us to not be conformed, Father, by the world and by the things that the world says we're supposed to care about and be about. But Father, help us to be renewed in our minds by your word. And I ask this in the name of Yeshua, Father. I pray for healing right now over any who are under the sound of my voice or who will hear my voice in the future, who are sick in their bodies, Father. Any who are feeling pain right now, Abba. I pray that you would touch, Father. You would touch and you would heal. Abba, I pray that you would uproot any disease, Father. Any unclean thing, anything that defiles, Father, that you would expose, reveal to us, Father, what we need to repent of. Reveal to us, Father, what we need to let go of. Reveal to us what we need to turn away from, Father, in the name of Yeshua. Father, help us to forgive. Give us hearts of compassion. Help us to let go of the things that bind us, Father, and keep us frozen in emotions. Heal us from trauma, Abba. Help us to cry out to you and to release the pain, Abba. In the name of Yeshua, we pray. Now, Father, as we go our separate ways tonight, I pray that you put a special blessing upon each home, upon each woman that listens tonight, Father. I pray that your words would reverberate in our spirit, and that, Father, we will sleep, Father, in your peace, and that we will wake up refreshed, Father, and renewed and with clear vision and renewed purpose. And Father, I pray that as we lay down tonight, Father, that you would put a special blessing upon Sister Only Love, that you would restore and return to her all that she poured out. I pray for every minister on this call, Father, that you would strengthen, renew, add to them, Abba. Use what they heard tonight, Father, to add to the ministry, to add to the people. We ask, Father, that you be esteemed most of all. You be esteemed in the people's heart, in the people's mind. And that we would be a light, Father, in this world and salt in this earth. And that we would do good works, Father, that point to our Father in the Shamayim. And Abba, we pray right now that you just keep us safe until the next time we come together. Help us to be motivated, Father, to start new prayer groups. additional prayer groups, Father. Help us to join prayer groups that are already going. Help us to not walk away from this teaching and forget to just be entertained and not change. Help us, Father, to do something different. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen and amen.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Mother Malaka. Thank you so much, sisters, for being with us. I just want to leave you with this question. Will you answer the call to be a wailing woman for our people during this season? Will you answer the call? Thank you so much. I'm so humbled to be able to come before you, and to Yah be all the glory and the power. Hallelujah. And thank you, sisters. Good night.